All right, here we are. We're back. The Crave Show with Chris, JRuss, and we've got Mr. Anthony Ebel with us today. How you doing, Anthony?
Great. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome, man. It's good to have you
Excellent.
here. Thanks for joining us. So, real quick, where is there, Anthony? Where are you at right now?
I'm in sunny Chicago right now. -11 wind chill. So,
Mm,
yeah, it's great.
-11. That does not sound enjoyable to me.
Siberia.
Yeah.
Oh man. And JRuss, where are you at?
Uh, I am in a little town in California called Menifee,
Menifee?
which is near, kind of in between Skydive Paris and Skydive Elsinore. Steph and I attended a big way camp with Matt Fry over the weekend. Matt's been doing a lot of kind of R&D on the next head down big way as far as different formations. Just the 200 way hasn't happened for a couple of attempts now in 2018 and 2021 or 22, something like that. And I think like a lot of people, it could have happened. We were close, especially in 2018. We were really close, but we were hampered by weather both years, and which is not super uncommon in Chicago. But we both record attempts, we just didn't get a ton of jumps. I think we in 2018 got maybe 9, and last year we got a couple more. But last year had a few different issues that we didn't expect. We had a really tough time with the base, and I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say things that people are going to take personally, but just the flying just wasn't as good last attempt as it was in 2018. So we're kind of going back to the drawing board. And Matt Fry has been the guy taking point on. He reconnected with Dan BC and kind of the Belly World and the things that they've done, where they ran up against some of the very same problems and sort of how they broke through those when they were trying the 300 way, and then they eventually made it to 400. So just trying to lean on their previous knowledge a little bit through Matt. And then Steph and I worked a military course in Elsinore, and here we are. We leave in the morning back to Colorado, which, as I understand, is very similar to Chicago right now with the incredibly cold temperatures. And so we'll see when we get home. Hopefully our chickens are still alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on those record attempts, well, I have a couple questions. Number one,
Mm.
what caused it to not happen? Just not everybody's getting connected, right? I mean, obviously, but is there more to it than that? I mean, it's not just that simple, or is it that simple?
No, it's not that simple. I mean, yes, that is the ultimate reason we didn't get a record. Not everybody's connected, um, but the behind the scenes, or the behind that answer, is more about sort of the structure that we used in building the different teams that coalesced at the time of the record, and the way that we engineered the base, the way we engineered the overall formation. Those are all we had really just scaled up what we had done in the past, and not really broken into any new ground as far as like different formational styles. And that's where we're at now, playing around with different stuff, and we need to get skills camps going and some
Yeah,
not quite
that's kind of
tryouts, but
that's
soon.
kind of interesting to me on the formations, because I can't remember if it was me and you that were having a conversation or somewhere. Who was that? And we didn't have a chance to get into it, but like that there is a reason to have those whackers, right? Like there's a reason that the shapes of certain formations as they get bigger. Was that me and you that was talking about that, or what was that?
Could have been. Man, you just always got to keep in mind when you ask those questions that I've got a concussed goldfish worth of short-term memory, and long-term is not much better. So it could have been. I'm not sure.
But like, is that? I mean, like, when you say looking at new formations and new things, like, what are you?
Oh,
Why is changing the
well,
formation? Why is that helpful? Or
specifically in the last attempt in 2021, I think. I probably need Steph as my external hard drive to tell me when that actually happened. But there was just tons and tons of tension within the formation, and I'm typically a first stinger on the base, and even when there were 5 guys in my pod, including me, when the other 4 got connected, a first stinger, a second stinger, and a closer, so to make 5 on each, first and second on each side, and then a closer in the middle. The tension was insane, and the guys that I had flying behind me were like Randy Lund and Brian Guile and JRuss and like rippers. And so it just kind of, when we debriefed, it called into question, like, are we jumping the right thing right now as far as like the shape of what we're doing, or are we sort of handicapping ourselves from the get-go by working with a shape that doesn't actually scale beyond a certain point? So Matt has been working on a design that Belly Flyers did come up with that he roughly calls spines and ribs. And I don't know how technical you want to get, but basically there's a circular base, and there had been circular pods all around that circular base, and then the pods continued backwards, and then there were connector lines between the pods. And Matt has been experimenting with just a line of flyers that goes out, and that's the spine, and then ribs that come off of that. But the whole thing, 20 people, are only connected to the base through the one person, the first stinger. But I haven't quite wrapped my head around why the tension isn't there. But in this last weekend, there were 17 people total connected to me stinging the base, and there was almost no tension. I didn't feel anybody behind me, or very little.
You
Just
were the
me
only
holding
hand
the base
on the base with one
and
hand.
and then 17 people connected behind me to my left arm.
And you make 18.
Something like that, 16, or so maybe it was 17 total. But
and
yeah,
it was not a lot. It was easy to
wavy
hold
or
on?
anything?
Yeah, no, not really. And I think maybe the lack of that connection on the sort of the distal end is what keeps the waves from going through. I really like it. We just did it. I had heard about the basic formation in the past, but I hadn't flown it myself. And so now, having flown it, I still think I got to digest it a little bit as far as like what I think about why it went so well, but it did go really well. And so that's super encouraging.
Huh. So I'm imagining like a leaf, like the stem of a leaf with all those little veins coming off of it. Like that's basically what it is.
Yes, but then trim half of it. So it's just basically there's a right-hand stinger, which in this case, say it was me, and then everyone docks with their right and is docked on their left, and you get these ribs coming off, say 3 ribs behind me, and then in front of me is another right-hand stinger with left-hand ribs coming off of that. And so it's, other than the connection points to the base, they're not connected to each other. A picture might have been helpful, but I don't think I have one handy.
Yeah.
But anyway, just
I can kind of imagine it. Kind of.
Yeah, playing around with sort of new iterations of what we might do, and so far, feeling pretty good.
That's cool. That's really cool.
But let's get back to Anthony, who hasn't been able to talk. So, Anthony, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and some backgrounds for the people who don't know you?
Yeah. So, I've been skydiving for 17 years. Basically born and raised out of Chicago. Got my license there. Started working ground crew there. Got my ratings, working there, and then just kind of worked up through the ranks. And then Rook needed an SNCA. Started doing that, and a lead tandem instructor. And then eventually it was in 2020. I was actually about to head out and venture out to do something else, and he said no. And I was the general manager. And I've been doing that ever since. I've got about 9,000 jumps, and that's about it. Like I've just been born and raised out of Chicago for a while. I mean, I met my wife there, and now I got 2 kids, so kind of split the time between that. But yeah, I guess that's about it.
Cool. So
Not a huge story. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, we're going to get into it more, but so from my perspective, I asked Anthony to come on the show, and in my sort of travels around the world, Anthony ranks very high as a person who is caring for a lot of other people on a daily basis, looking out for their safety, their basically trying to keep them having a good time and be safe at a huge drop zone. Managing the staff, managing the planes, managing the DZO, just sort of that juggling act that managers and S&TAs get into when trying to balance the the desire to make money as a business and the desire to keep people safe, which sometimes can conflict, and doing a really good job of it. So, and I wanted to have you on for that, that kind of insight. So, the first thing that I wanted to ask, this will hopefully get us going down a good road. But if you had to think of one safety related issue in skydiving that you wished people you could snap your fingers and they would pay more attention to it, or it would be fixed, what would it be?
Just one. I
We
think
can
the
do more
one
than
I've
one.
seen the most, yeah. The spin, it's specific to Skydive Chicago. It's not just Skydive Chicago, it's the entire industry, but the don't delay cutaway. USPA's had a big campaign about it. This particular year, we had, thankfully, nobody died, but we had three major injuries, and they all had to deal with the fact that people had a malfunctioning canopy and they just didn't handle it properly. And some of the major accidents that's happened over the time I've been there, four of them, it's just been they haven't done their EPs properly, or they rode it into the ground, or something of that nature. They just did not do their emergency procedures either properly or at all. And that's the one thing I can't wrap my head around. I mean, we have our hard decks, and if it's not working, you cut away pull reserve. We there's only set three handles. We keep it simple for a reason, and for some reason, it no matter how much we do it, there seems to still be an issue. Um, so I think because I think that's the biggest issue, because the results they're deadly. It's not like some of the other stuff that there's accidents and there may be annoyance and stuff like that, but the consequences of not performing those emergency procedures properly are dramatic. So, and they're simple, but the consequences are pretty great. So that would be the number one thing. If we could fix that,
Do
it'd be huge. So
do you think that is that typically, and if you have to guess, you don't have to guess, but if you know, like, is that more often more experienced jumpers? Are
yeah,
they more more likely to
yep,
delay?
yeah, yeah. So just taking like Skydive Chicago six, and I could go into USPA stuff too, if I had the numbers in front of me, but just off the top of my head, it's almost all D licensed that are doing it. Whether they're the old school jumper that's helmeted and low, they don't have an RSL, or an AD. I mean, that's a part of the issue with it too. But they're almost all D licensed, and that's the most frustrating thing is we're experienced skydivers. We should know better. We should be worried about this for that new A license jumper. But they're the ones not having the issue because it's so ingrained in your head. Cutaway, pulled reserve by your hard deck, and they're doing it. But somewhere along the way, I feel like whether it's the mentality of I got this, I think a lot of it is uh, they've been in a line twist scenario many, many times before, and they get this mentality of, oh, I got this, I got this, I got this, and then they realize, oh, in this particular shot, I don't have this, and then by the time it gets to that point, it's already too late. So,
Yeah.
but,
When you, I can think of a couple of things that have happened at Skydive Chicago that I can remember that resulted in a fatality in maybe 2 years ago, and then maybe 6 years ago or something like that, where there were problems with either delaying, or I think there was one out of sequence. And they were both very experienced skydivers. Obviously, we can't talk to them about what was going on for them. However, there have been a few of the non-fatals, and in fact, we had Nick Russo on this show, one of the first shows we did, because it had just happened at Skydive Chicago. And I'm curious, like, what do you ask them? How do you piece it together? Like, what their mindset was, and what kind of, what do you come up with afterwards?
yeah, I think in particular Nick, what we kind of that part of it was it was spinning so much. He thought he had it, and probably that loss of blood in the head, his decision making was definitely skewed a little bit.
Hmm.
Um, but it's also is that fight or flight type thing. People just freeze up to the scenario.
Hmm.
Maybe they're not putting themselves. It's the last safety day I was really harping on. It's easy to just go through the motions and do your cutaway procedures, but to actually put yourself in the scenario, like get yourself in a hanging harness and spin yourself around, get yourself dizzy. Some of the things that is when you're doing your exercise, like when you're going for a run, go on a run and then go over your emergency procedures while you're going for a jog, while you're,
Hmm.
you're out of breath. Your blood really isn't going quite to your head or wherever it is, and you're exhausted. And if you can get that down pat over and over again, hopefully that it'll make you have better decisions when you're actually in the moment of something happening. So,
Do you think that there's any compounding issue with like the response that people get after they chop? Like,
yes.
are we doing people a disservice on the ground with like, man, what'd you do? Why didn't you fight that? Oh, it was a brake fire. Why didn't you pop the other brake? Um, and especially for people who are like, I think I have 20 or 21 cutaways, and I don't give a shit what people think after I cut away. But a lot of people take that personally, and they're like, oh man, maybe I messed up. I should have fought more. Or, like, do you feel like the community needs to reassess how we're dealing with people when they come down from a chop?
100%. Um, you know, that's actually one of my biggest pet peeves is questioning somebody's ability to cut away. Even to the point, I can go on a tangent. I'm sorry if I go on too long. Um, a couple years ago, there was a student that cut away because the slider came down. Um, so obviously we know your slider comes down, but people are like, oh, that was totally wrong. You did the wrong thing. But when you look at it, he didn't do anything wrong. He knew in that moment he thought he had a malfunction. So he did his emergent and he didn't think he could land a parachute properly. So he cut away and pulled his reserve. So in that exact moment, he did everything right. Now we'll have a talk and tell him about how, that's how it's supposed to work and so on and so forth. But you can't question what they were thinking, what he was thinking at that exact moment, because what he did was correct. So it doesn't matter how much they did. The first thing when somebody comes down, they have cutaways, you give them a high five. Hey, nice job. I don't even have to know what the problem was. Hey, good job. You saved your life. And then you get
Mm.
dig down in the nitty gritty of kind of what happened and so on and so forth. And if you think like if they had line twist or something, um, oh, you don't tell them, oh, you could have fought that longer or anything like that. At that particular moment, they didn't think that they could survive that. So they did the correct thing. And I think as a community, we have to have that in our mind instead of, oh, we should be able to correct every single problem. Um, I just saw another video where people post their line twists and how they get out of their line twists. And it's like this point of pride for that, which I guess it's good. You can give it the old college try and that's fine. But it it your manhood or whatever you're thinking about doesn't increase because you got out of that line twist or anything like that. And people should kind of stop thinking in that sense. It's not a point of pride. We're just trying to get down to the ground safely. So if you got a line twist, that's fine. But if you have to chop it, it's just as fine.
Yeah. On my first cutaway was actually at Skydiving, Arizona. It was a while ago. And uh, I ended up pulling my. I had a slamming opening line twist diving. I had been on a Spectre. I'd just gotten on this stiletto for like 20 jumps, and I just a really wild ride, and I wasn't really mentally prepared for the differences in canopy, and I had about 1,000 jumps at the time, but um, I chopped and I pulled my reserve from my back. And I was just honestly, I was a little bit panicked, and it was the back in the day when I had a side mount like PC9 or 101, if you guys remember those big cameras we used to wear, and the reserve ripped, the reserve deployment ripped my camera helmet off, and as a testament to how low I was when my feet touched the ground, my camera was at my feet, um, and I was able to splice the tape back together with some Scotch tape, and I played it for everybody, And when it showed me cutting away and pulling my reserve from my back, there was probably 20 or 30 people there, and all of them were like, "Oh no," just a real negative. And I kind of cringed, like, "Oh fuck, maybe I really messed up." And Brian Burke, if anybody remembers Brian, was also a longtime SNCA at Skydiving Arizona, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, are you feeling okay?" And I went, "Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm okay." And he's like, "Then you did good. Like, you could do better next time, but you're here, and you did a good job." And I remember, and I've tried to pass that on to people since then, like it, just not to be in like that, whatever you want to call it, your manhood or your big dick contest on, you have to fight this until the absolute last moment, because that's just not the case. And I think we've all, I mean, I could start rattling off people who had that mentality and no longer with us. And I wish I could relay that to the whole community.
Yeah.
Maybe we can culturally change.
Yeah. Well, JRuss, you know, we've talked a lot about like the value of watching those types of videos and if it actually helps or not, or hinders, or, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I do think one thing, and you don't have to watch a video to do this, but like the times where I've learned about spinning line twists, like I remember one time I was at Spaceland Dallas and somebody landed and they had just had a cutaway, and he cut away at like 4,000 feet or something. He had done not a high pull, but pulled a little bit high, and but he had a super small canopy. And I remember my this was a long time ago. My first reaction was like, line twist. Why did he cut away? You know, that's what I thought. I didn't know. You know, I was a younger jumper, inexperienced. I'm jumping a big, like at that time, like a 190 or something. And then as he was, of course, I didn't say anything. I didn't really know the guy. I'm not gonna like berate him or anything, you know. But in my mind, I was just kind of questioning, like, that seems kind of silly to cut away just because of line twists, you know. And but then as I listened to him talk with other people, more experienced jumpers, and they were talking about what he was actually experiencing, and then they were telling stories, I was like, oh wow. Like, I remember learning in that moment how dangerous and out of control line twists can be. Like, I just didn't know. You know, I was just young and inexperienced and jumping big docile canopies, and so, you know, I had a couple line twists, but it was like 3 or 4 twists, and I just slowly undo them. And so, not that you have to watch videos of that to learn that, but hearing people talk about the seriousness of something, and you don't have to like shock and awe, but just the legitimate, like, hey, it's a big deal. And I remember people kind of patting him on the back, like, dude, nice work. You know, just almost exactly what you're saying, Anthony. Like, they're like, dude, nice work, you did it, you're good, way to go, man. And it made me feel better about, oh, okay, if I have serious line twists that are scary, I'm going to cut away. You know, like that actually impacted me. The little conversations that happened right there in front of me. So I think it's very significant, and we have an opportunity to do that for one another.
Yeah, hopefully we can start giving more high fives and hey, good job, rather than like quitter or pussy or whatever it is that we call people after they cut away instead. Try and change that around a little bit.
High fives are a lot better than calling, you know, the paramedics, or worse. So you know, it's not just line twists too. We had an issue, at least where like a brake lock. We've had quite a few of those at the drop zone. We can go into the reason why. It's basically how people are stowing their excess and putting their line through the little loop of the excess and pulling it down, which creates a lock on there. So that happened a couple of times at the drop zone, and some people chopped it, and a couple people landed on their rears. And every single one that tried to land it on their rears ended up getting hurt or majorly hurt. And it's that, again, if you don't have a fully functional parachute, you shouldn't be trying to land it on your rears. You know, that skill of landing on your rears is only like if you're under your reserve and you have nothing else to do. Yes, you can potentially land on your rears. I mean, JRuss, I land on my rears a lot too, but we always have the toggles in our hands. It's a fully functional parachute, so in case something doesn't go right, we can always stab out or do whatever we need to do. But you should be chopping. If you have a toggle lock, you need to be chopping that. no questions. It doesn't matter if you have a big parachute or a small parachute or anything that's in between.
Yeah, I think it's difficult too. Like with the people that I can think of who had issues that didn't chop and then had an injury, of course their thoughts afterwards that they're happy to share with anybody is, I should have just gotten rid of it. And
Yeah.
how do you reach all those people who didn't hear that message so that when they get in a similar scenario, they can just get rid of it? Like, it's one cutaway, it's one reserve ride, it's $80 or whatever it costs. And that, like our interview with Nick, I mean, there were a host of issues there, but he did say a couple different times, like, my life is worth more than this canopy. My life is worth more than a reserve ride. But in the moment, I wasn't thinking that. I was thinking, I don't want to lose $4,000 and blah, 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 blah. But that somehow we got to, I don't know, get through to people that the thought that needs to be in the front of your mind is, this is potentially a very bad scenario. Handle it appropriately, not based on money and not based on prestige and not based on anything other than surviving this scenario. And then I think that there would be a lot quicker and a lot more chops, but that's okay with me.
Mm-hmm.
You can chase that
I've
main
always
find
felt
unicorn.
When people are talking about downsizing and stuff, like, can you afford to downsize? The more we downsize, the more often chops happen. The smaller your parachute happen, the more we have to cut away. It's just the way it works. So, can you afford losing that $4,000 parachute? If your answer is no, then you should probably stay on a crappy, cheap canopy for a little bit. So I work in a sport, and I could have sold my old canopy for a couple $100, but I kept it. Just okay, if I lose it, I can at least put it back on my rig and I can get back to work. So I'm not losing out on money, so to speak.
So Anthony, you've been managing the drop zone since, what did you say, 2020?
Yeah, 2020.
So about 3 years.
Yeah.
Or a little longer, maybe.
Probably a year before then too, but I got the official title in 2020.
The title. So I'm really interested to know, are you able to think about things, and you were at the drop zone for so long that may not have changed much, but what are the things that you wouldn't have expected about managing a drop zone? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I went right now, never managed a drop zone, if I went and like took charge of a drop zone and started managing it, what would I be surprised by?
Well, I think it for one thing, if this is your hobby and you do it for a love, and how that changes once it becomes your full job. And it gets a little bit harder to really just look back and why we're doing this. We're doing this because it's fun. We're doing it because we have a love and a passion for skydiving. And you have to constantly be going back to that in order to stay around. You see, I mean, JRuss, you've been around a while. Like, a lot of DZMs don't last or DZOs don't last because it just kills the passion out of it. And you have to constantly be thinking about how to keep that passion. Um, for me too, it's kind of funny. Like, I obviously I don't fun jump a lot, but when I do fun, I just do hop and pops. And they're like, oh, come out. I'm like, no, I actually just enjoy doing hop and pops. Nobody has to talk to me, and I can just enjoy the sky by myself. And I don't have to do anything but just skydive. And that's as simple and weird as that might seem. That's what I enjoy doing that. That's fun. You know, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. What is there anything that you can think of that you wish fun jumpers knew? Like, not safety oriented necessarily, but like as a fun jumper going to a drop zone, any drop zone, how can I be a good fun jumper? Like, what is there something that you wish you could just tell all of the fun jumpers, like, hey, start doing this or stop doing this or think about this, or just as far as being a
there's
good participant at the drop zone?
a couple. Well, one, skydiving's not cheap. You should know that from the get-go. But it's a community, and you're part of that community. So, uh, yes, it's a business, and we got the bottom line to deal with. But it's different than going into your Hardee's or a Walmart or something like that. It's a full community, and you're part of that whole process. Um, so I got this. best I can think of. Just
Yeah.
In your time at Skydive Chicago, Anthony, are there trends that you've seen either in positive or negative directions as far as like one comes to mind, and I don't want to spoil your answer by giving you mine, but just things that have changed over your 17 years of basically being at Skydive Chicago in terms of like what people are getting at boogies or what they expect on the weekend or canopy choices or community stuff, or like what are the changes that you know of that are in the front of your mind?
I think people are a lot more safety conscious now than ever. When we started in JRuss, um, it was kind of the blue skies, black death mentality of things. To give you a little bit of background, I grew up in Quincy, Illinois. So for people
Mm.
that was home of the World Free Fall Convention, 5,000, the largest boogie that ever happened. So I grew up with that kind of mentality of how it was. I never skydived there, but I was surrounded by it. But
And just for
it's
clarity,
come
that was a
on.
freaking zoo, right? Like the free fall
Oh,
convention was a free for all.
I mean, there was multiple deaths every single year, um, and it was just a boogie. Like
Yeah.
we wouldn't stand if we had a fatality every single boogie. That boogie wouldn't be around anymore. But back then it was accepted. It was just the way it was. Um, But to get back on, the trend is it's just gotten a lot safer, and that's not just because of the rules that we made, and not only rules but the education. People are for can't downsizing or learning how to swoop. There's now courses that they can go do. There's this podcast. If you want to learn how to flock, there's programs that you can go do. Before we were just hucking it and seeing how it would work. And now there's actually education behind everything. There's classes that you can take, and the general population is wanting that. It's not so much too that we have to make the rules for that to happen. The newer jumpers want that.
Yeah.
They want to come to Summerfest, and they're okay with the fact that we're only doing 90s and we're not doing big turns. Um, so I think
I had
that's a
somebody. Oh,
trend that I've been seeing. Yeah,
I
it's
was going to
just
say
really
there.
nice to
Nope, you go.
go ahead.
No, you go.
Last night it was like a couple years ago, and we got wind holds at Skydive Chicago. If it's roughly 20 miles an hour, we go on an A and B hold. And sometimes we get visiting fun jumpers that are there, and they get pretty upset by it because they come from a smaller drop zone. Oh, I can jump in these conditions, so on and so forth. So it was Summerfest, and it was about on the borderline, and we couldn't even get some of the loads to go. And it's not too windy; it's only 20. And I see this big group of people there just hanging out, watching everybody. And I'm like, oh, what license do you have? I'm like, oh, I have a C or D license. You can get on a load, right? Yeah, I just want to watch the first couple of loads. And there was a whole group of people doing that. And it was a turning point. Like people are finally starting to look on the side of safety, you know.
Hmm. Oh,
Think,
we might have lost Chris.
I'm
I don't
here.
see him.
You don't see
your
me?
video cut
Oh,
out.
I don't see Anthony.
I
oh,
see Anthony.
I see JRuss. I see myself.
Huh, interesting. Y'all can't see me?
Nope.
Weird.
Turn the lights
Well,
back on.
yeah. Well,
So
we can hear
what do you
everybody.
attribute that to, Anthony? As far as like increased awareness or desire for safety, like is that just the new generation of people coming up in the world, or a recognition of kind of the cowboy nature that skydiving used to have that people like getting away from, or like combination? What have you thought that through?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any stats. It's just all by gut. But I think the younger generation is just, again, they're more safety conscious. They're in some ways they're smarter than us. Um, like, uh, yeah, I look at the drugs and alcohol that's been around the sport for a while, and you've seen this trend too. It's gotten a lot less the
Yeah.
last probably 5-10 years. People are more health conscious, and I think that has to do with it also. Um,
Hmm.
I can only assume, but it's just my gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
What would you
Have you seen
say?
that trend too?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the answer that came to mind for me was that I've been to most of the Summerfests that have happened, and then I think I missed 1 or 2 years, but also just the other boogies that we go to. And a little bit, it's hard to say this about Summerfest because I started structuring things the way that I thought people wanted them, and whether that was true or that was just the way that I wanted to see it go, I'm not sure. But I wanted people to get something out of their boogie. They're paying a registration fee, and they're paying a bunch of money for jumps, and they're here for this, what it was a 10-day event. It's kind of shrunk now to 7 or 8, but or 9, I can't remember. But anyway, I wanted people to leave with a skill set, an improvement, not just, man, I was down at the bar and we had a big party and there was a DJ and blah blah blah. I wanted people to get something out of their boogie, and I think that was a reflection of what I was hearing. But I feel like as I talk to other people around the sport, that there's a similar feeling from them of like, it's not that people aren't gonna party at a boogie or an event, but they're there for a reason, and they want their money to translate into something that means something to their future. Um, and I really like that. I'm not a big partier, as I think you guys know, but if I go to an event like I did last weekend, I'm there to learn. I'm there for a reason, and I think that's reflected in a lot of jumpers.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting because like I've only been jumping since like 2013 or so, but I've talked to a couple, like some older skydivers, and I've had a few older skydivers tell me like, "Oh yeah, I don't go to boogies anymore. They're too dangerous. It's too out of control. It's not safe. And I was like, "Oh, okay, But then I go to a boogie and I'm like, this doesn't feel dangerous. This feels like actually very safety conscious. Like it doesn't feel dangerous. It doesn't feel like a zoo. It doesn't feel out of control. And I mean, I think that's a testament to what you're kind of saying, is that there has been a change in the culture. And that's a good positive thing, back to what we were talking about earlier about the culture, how we can influence and shape the culture for ourselves to be safer. But like I go to boogies now at Spaceland Dallas, and it's like, man, they're very well organized. The organizers are all top notch. They're not letting people go on jumps that aren't qualified to go on jumps. They're not putting more than 2 movement groups on a load. They're like really paying attention to. I mean, it seems like everything, but it feels very safe, and it feels like you're getting to learn and grow and meet new friends and stuff. It's pretty awesome, I think.
I wonder if there's, because when you said Spaceland, that's Steve Boyd, right? Stevie.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And Stevie's been around a long time. Trent Alkek, who does the aircraft stuff for Spaceland, been around a long time. Those guys were on a competitive team for years, super good flyers. And then Skydive Chicago is Rook, he's been skydiving his whole life. His dad was around a long time. But some of the guys that are now in those positions, and Steve and Rook kind of come to mind, they lived through those days of party at Skydive America, or some events that were out of control. And I wonder, as they get older and they've seen all that and seen sort of the consequences, but now they're in a position to make changes to at least their little part of the culture, that's what they've learned. That's the evolution of their skydiving career, and what they want to give other people is more safe than what they got. And I mean, I've never heard that from Rook. I've never asked him. I've never asked Steve. But that came to mind when you said that. Just both those guys have been around a long time, and probably seen a lot of stuff that was far from safe.
Mm-hmm.
I have to imagine that makes a difference.
I mean, it's a natural.
Nope, you go.
It's just a natural progression with everything that, things will get progressive, not just with gear, but mentality. You can see that in society, and I don't want to go off that tangent, but society in general, we will continuously progress, hopefully for the better of things.
Yeah.
So it's
What
a natural evolution.
if you had to nail down the most difficult thing about your job? Again, I don't want to spoil it with my answer for your answer, but what are the difficult things about being a manager, being an SNTA?
Dealing with bozo organizers like JRuss.
I don't.
Gimme.
The most stressful thing. I mean, obviously those bad days. Those are the ones that you stick around for a while. I mean, that's an obvious answer though. Nobody likes those days. Um, but uh, other than that, like we talked about how the jumpers are getting are more safety oriented and so on and so forth. But sometimes when it comes to weather and trying to make the calls when it comes to weather, because it's not cut and dry. You can't have rules.
Mm.
I mean, there is rules when it comes to weather, but we all know, like, especially Chicago weather, it changes all the time. And when you have a couple hundred people, 100 tandems staring down your throat, you got to make a decision whether the plane's going to go or not. It can be quite stressful at times. So you just want to kind of hide in my office or around the corner so nobody can talk to me, or that jumper that comes up. Oh, I think there's a hole over there. We should definitely go towards that hole. Or in my drop zone, we would punch this. Or just gets that's got to be some more. It's not like it's horrible, but it gets frustrating. So,
Yeah, I watch those conversations
yeah.
between you and the pilots all the time, and don't never envy. I don't even want to step over there and say anything. Just let them figure it out. And if we sit on the ground, I'll sit on the ground. But yeah, it looks like not fun.
Yeah, we do our best. Like there's little uh I have so many different little tricks, like time lapsing clouds at the direction that they're coming. A lot of times I'll see a hole, I'll set a timer, and I'm like, okay, if I would have made this call at this particular time, did I make in 15 minutes they would have been at altitude? Did I make the right call? And then I can start judging holes. Or that was and say, oh, that was we could have hit that hole. I'm like, that hole wasn't there 10 minutes ago. And I'll pull out my timer and show them I've been timing this hole for 10 minutes or so on and so forth. And so you can make a little bit better judgment and guesses at that point. And when you hit that hole or you make the right call, you mark it on your headboard as a win, because you're gonna have a lot of losses. Planes landing and Rook just lost $400 or whatever. I mean, but you try to not make too many of those.
Yeah.
At some point you got to roll the dice. You can't just sit there and look at it all day. But
Do you feel like you get a pretty solid amount of autonomy to make those calls?
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's times, but from when I've talked to other DZMs and stuff like that, I've got it pretty easy. Rook supports what I do. I'm pretty, yeah. Just he doesn't micromanage by any means. I try to run that too with the other SNTAs that are around. So they're going to make mistakes. They're not going to make the same calls I'm going to make. They're a different person, and you kind of have to just kind of watch that and see how they do, and hopefully they'll make good calls. But the way to get to making good calls is you got to make some bad ones in there too. Um,
Yeah.
when it
Is
comes
there any
to
network for? Oops, sorry. No, always you.
I said when it comes to like making those weather calls. Now, when it comes to safety, I'm not gonna. If I see something that's unsafe, I'm going to step in right away, put my foot down for whatever the situation. But sometimes weather calls, you just gotta let the plane fly and see how it works out.
I was going to ask if there was like a. Uh, I mean, what came to mind was a WhatsApp group, but like just a chat group among drop zone managers, drop zone owners, a way to pass good information. And I'm guessing there's not, but I do you remember that wingsuit kid who left his leg straps off?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
down in Sebastian.
No, not the one we caught at Skydiving Chicago.
Oh, the one.
Um,
Okay, okay, yeah,
yep. And then you ended up doing a
yeah,
little research, like you reached out. I don't want to say a name, but another large drop zone, and got some background information that he had been through that stuff before. It made me think at the time, like it'd be nice if there was like I don't know, some kind of communication place that people could check in, and if there was that kind of stuff. I mean, not like you wanted to ostracize the guy, but just a heads up, like, hey, if he shows up at your drop zone, we've had this issue before, or she, or I don't know, this happened on our airplane, be careful of that. And I don't know, with the somewhat competitive nature of drop zones, just you want to get as much business as you can for your place. Does that prohibit that, or is there any kind of network between you guys?
So there's a Facebook page that DZMs and DZOs share a community, not to what you're talking about, but you sell
Mhm.
rigs, but also that we bounce certain issues off of each other. Um, so there's that. Now, as far as a page to like blacklist people, there there's been talks of having a page like that, but nothing, at least to my knowledge, has come to fruit with that. It's basically what I was telling you with that. Like if I get somebody that, leaves their leg straps off and they're not responding very well, I'll call either what drop zones that they were jumped at, or our surrounding drop zones and just give them a heads up on what to expect. With the advent of Burble, because I don't know what the statistic is, but a lot of places have Burble. We can look through their history and kind of see what drop zones they jumped at, and we can give those places a call and a heads up. As far as communication, it, there's not one particular site that's all we do is talk about that. Think about on a Burble website. Sometimes you'll see on the Burble Facebook page. Sometimes you'll say, "Hey, watch out for this particular person," but it doesn't happen a whole lot.
Maybe one of our listeners out there can dedicate some time to that. And Chris, I don't know if I told you, but a couple of years ago, I don't think it was last summer. I can't remember. They all run together. But we had a guy show up. He was charging, like trying to make a bunch of jumps. He didn't have a lot of jumps, but he was wingsuiting, and he got on the plane without his leg straps. And we got him off. I mean, that was for sure his last jump if he had jumped out of the plane. But then Anthony did a little digging in the background, and the guy had if I'm you can correct me if I'm getting this wrong, Anthony, but 3 separate incidents at another large drop zone where he
Yeah.
didn't have his leg straps once, he didn't have his chest strap once, and he didn't have his Cypress on in 3 separate incidents. And then they asked him to stop jumping there. And then he showed up with us and forgot his leg straps. So, not necessarily that you want to kick him out of the sport, but we probably need to keep a little bit closer eye on that guy than maybe some other people. And maybe there's
How did y'all catch it on the plane? I mean, how did anybody
his,
even?
he just had
How
a
would you even
strap.
see it? It's all zipped up, isn't it? You'd be inside there.
It should have been, but that was the clue. Like one of his straps was waving in the wind as we got in the plane, and
Oh man,
it got brought to his attention, and he admitted his leg straps were off.
oh,
Lucky,
man,
definitely
saved his life for
that
sure.
could have been worse, for sure. But yeah, it just made me think like maybe there should be a place where you guys can communicate that stuff, and
Yeah.
and
You can call the regional director, and in that situation, I did call them. And if the whatever happened is egregious enough, the USPA can get involved with that. But my experience is it needs to be pretty bad for them to like the regional director to give them a call for that to happen. It has happened. It'll come across, regional director, hey, watch out for this person, and their USPA license is suspended. And at that point, then all the drop zones around the area will get word of that. But to be honest, it doesn't happen that often. Most of it's just, again, it's the industry, the owners and managers, because it's not good for anybody if something happens. Yes, we're in competition, but it's not good for
yeah,
anybody.
yeah.
Are there things as a drop zone manager that and if you answer this, it might make it sound bad towards the drop zone, and I don't mean it like that, but just the natural that you want to learn more, you want to get better at being a manager, at being a drop zone manager, running a drop zone, running that type of business, because it's a very unique business. Like you said, it is a community. There's all this stuff. Like, are there things that you wish you could learn more about, or the areas that you would like to grow, or things that you'd like to do better as far as managing a drop zone? And do you understand what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah,
And not because Rook or they're not because they're not taking care of you, just because there's a lot to learn.
yeah. It'd be nice to get more, me myself personally, to get more involved with the fun jumping aspect so I can learn more. The great thing having JRuss there is he's this awesome skydiver, and I rely on him for a lot of the information. I'm not this great skydiver. I just happen to work at a great drop zone. So I utilize a lot of the people around me, JRuss and everything, to try to to pick up where I fail at, so to speak, um, and help delegate some of that stuff. So just being a little bit better on that, I guess personally, would be nice on my side, but it takes a lot of time and dedication to be able to do that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool that you're, like you said, you're leaning on the community to take care of one another, letting people use their strengths to serve each other. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, the sport has grown exponentially, and you can't find one person that's just great at everything. And that person just
Yeah.
doesn't exist. You just have to be able to find the great people that work in that particular spot and utilize it, and then trust
Yeah.
them too, for that. So, but,
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. What are you looking forward to in the next season, Anthony?
um, hmm. I mean, I, this might sound weird, but it's gotten so much. It runs like a machine that it just runs. But actually, Nationals is coming up this year. And I don't know if
Yeah.
last Nationals was, we just felt like we rocked it. Like, for lack of it, we just did great. That's one of the best parts of being a DZ manager, SNTA, especially on those really busy days when you have five, six planes running, and the machines just working. And like at those times when you're standing there, like JRuss knows my little corner that I spend a lot of time out looking at the sky, and I feel like I'm bored, and then you just know that all the pieces are just working. And That's one of the best feelings, at the end of the day when we fly 110, 120 loads, and everybody got to go home and 2,000 skydives. Those are the days I look forward to doing. Like it's great. It's awesome. Yeah.
What do you think, Chris?
You,
110, 120
you,
loads.
did you see my face?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
guys have days when you do 120 loads?
Yeah, I did like for nationals or for Summerfest. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we did 2 or 3 days that over 100 loads.
That's
And it just
cool.
the line, everything aligns. Um,
Mhm.
That's cool. I
but
want to
the
think
other
about
thing
that for
that's
a
kind
second.
of, I mean, it's not just one person. I mean, that's a whole, that's why I said the machine,
Yeah.
it from the guys that are cleaning the toilet to the air boss to the pilots to the organizers, like everything has to be in flow for that to all work. And
Dude,
manifest all that. Uh, so it takes a whole team, and when it gels like that, it's a great feeling.
is that the number? Would that be about 2,000 skydives? Is that what you said
Yeah,
a second ago? Is
yeah,
that right?
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
That's
During
So
cool.
Summerfest, there's not very many seats available on the plane.
That's
So
cool.
120 loads times 22, pretty much every load.
2,000 skydives in a day, and everybody's happy and safe. That's pretty awesome.
happy and safe. Yeah.
Happy and
I get
safe.
one of the great feelings is this Summerfest. Usually there's one or two Buster rides or ambulance rides during Summerfest. We do anywhere from
Mm.
11 to 13,000 skydives in this 10-day period. Uh, so, but last Summerfest, we didn't have a single Buster ride. Like we didn't have, we had a couple bumps and bruises, and that was it.
For the
So
whole
that's a good
week,
number
nothing.
for the 10 days. Nothing.
Wow.
I mean, I take that back. There was a helicopter flight, but it was not skydiving related at all. But
You can't control everything.
A car wreck or something, or
Control
what?
that. What's that?
Was it a car wreck or something, or?
Yeah, it was a car wreck.
Okay.
So we
I guess we'll
do
just leave it at that.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't like it's a secret. There was a massive amount of people watching. But no, for the last Summerfest, we do a stunt, and we have a guy that's a stunt man. He's he's a professional stunt guy. But just like everything has risks, and the stunt didn't go right. And
Oh no.
so like you basically did a flip with the car and landed on the roof, and got got hurt. So but he's
He's
doing
okay.
good now. So
Yeah.
He
everything's
was eventually
pretty good.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
So
wow.
It
The
just
Okay,
door is
you
actually the door is still in my office, actually. Did you see that door,
really
JRuss?
no.
Yeah.
I'll look at it
We
next time.
haven't been able to, if he's listening or something, I need to give you your door, but it was kind of cool. They did the Jaws of Life to take the door off, and instead of a Goodwill card, everybody just signed the door. Um, and that was
Uh,
his Goodwill card, except we haven't given it. You can't put that in the mail. So,
that totally
it's still
sounds like
sitting there.
skydivers. That's exactly what skydivers would do. Card. What does he need a card for? Just sign the door.
Yeah.
Chris,
That's awesome.
I've been meaning to say you're going to come out this summer and organize at Summerfest, so you get to see all this stuff. But
Dude,
it
I
put
would
a
love
little.
that. I would love to
Oh,
do
me
that.
too. It put a little damper on the day as far as did we cancel the fireworks? I think we did.
We did cancel the fireworks. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, and maybe I can't remember. I mean, Steph and I didn't do the night jump. Was there a night jump?
There,
Can't
I
remember.
no, I nixed those actually. That was a hard decision, but
Yeah.
yeah, we ended up nixing those.
So the guy was stuck in the car for a little while, but
Well, I
he's okay.
actually, since we're talking about organizers, I am interested to hear your thoughts and opinion on Anthony on that particular topic, because that's something I try to ask a lot of people about. What does it mean to be a good organizer? As an organizer, how can I help the drop zone? As an organizer, how can I help the fun jumpers? How can I help the pilot? How can, like, what does that mean? How do I be a good organizer? I don't know that, we have, 400 or 500 people listen to our show. So I don't know if any of them are organizers or not, but I'm sure a lot of them are jumping with organizers. So I think it's just for one, it's just a fun topic. It's interesting. And I think it's important. Because it seems to me like that role has changed a little bit over the past maybe 10 or 15, 20 years, maybe, is what it kind of seems like from what I hear, the way people talk about it and the way it looks now. But do you have any thoughts on all that stuff?
Yeah, well, as a manager in SNTA, like if you're the organizer, especially when it comes to Summerfest, you're not an employee by any means, but you are an instructor, and you should hold yourself up to that instructor caliber. Um, yeah, you're gonna go out and show them a good time, but you have to have a safe skydive involved with that, and you have to be able to follow the rules that the drop zone is put in place. Essentially, yeah, you are representing the drop zone in that fashion. So you're not a visiting jumper. You are representing the drop zone during your time there. So that's just on top of the whole safety aspect that you should be running safe skydives and so on and so forth. Um, One of our values at Skydive Chicago is how to get the yes. So that means if you don't have an answer to the question, you just don't say, I don't know. You
Hmm.
say, hold on, I'll find you the answer, or I'll go find somebody that will have the answer. And that's the mentality for that. Like if you can say no because maybe your group's getting too big or something of that nature, but then it's your job to find that person or an answer so they can get on a jump or do what they want to do, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I
Cool.
think that Chris, when Anthony was talking, I think one of the things that comes to mind is that from the top, in this case, Rook and Anthony are the sort of the top of Skydive Chicago. There has to be an emphasis on what you want to see out of your drop zone, and in our case, we're lucky enough that is primarily safe skydives, and then after that, we can do a lot of different things, but um, that's coming from the highest levels of our organization as a focus on safety, and I think that it's not unique, but it is definitely desirable to have it be that way, at least for me, especially because I grew up in a drop zone that was not the focus, and it was a pretty sharp contrast when I started going to places that was the focus, and that's the kind of place I want to be.
Is it less fun?
To be safe?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the place that I grew up jumping, which it's not a big secret, but I'm not going to call them out right now, was a zoo. I mean, it was just bring in the dollars, send the tandems. Nobody ever watched the landing area. Nobody ever counted canopies. Nobody ever looked at the pattern or talked to anybody about bad patterns. Nobody tried to set anything up for any kind of safety parameters. And that started at the top, and it continues to this day, to be honest. And so when I talk to people, I'm just really glad that I didn't feel trapped in the place that I was jumping, that I was able to go spend my time, spend my money in a place that did focus on the thing. I mean, I want to make it through these skydives. I got a bunch of jumps, all of them are fun, and I want to make a bunch more. And I'm not going to get to do that if the place is run like a bunch of cowboys, and that's absolutely not what we've got. And I appreciate that. And I think if our listeners are at a place where that isn't the main priority, then maybe they need to find a new spot.
Yeah. And you don't have to stay there.
No.
And well, I mean, maybe run through that list again. Like, what would be because some people may not realize that their drop zone is not safe. Like if you're jumping at one drop and that's the only place you've ever jumped, you might think everything's fine and dandy, and you may not realize how unsafe it is. So run through that list again. Like, what are some things that if you went to a drop zone, what are the things that you would see and you'd be like, whoa, 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 I'm not jumping here?
Well, someone is present at all times. When we're jumping at Skydive Chicago, someone's there, and it is a team effort. And I've noticed things that are not right about the place, and I have a pathway to speak to somebody and correct them. But by and large, one of the SNTAs at Skydive Chicago is present at all times, and they are, they've got a lot of work to do, a lot of things going on. But Anthony's out when we load the plane, or Johnny or Baxter, sorry, not Johnny anymore, but Baxter or Anthony are out there when we're loading the plane. And then at least I don't know what they do for the next 15 minutes, but when I land, they're standing there watching. They're next to the, one of the ground guys with the radio, counting canopies, making sure everybody landed safely, making sure everybody landed in the pattern. There's times where somebody doesn't do the right thing, and maybe one of those guys is busy, Anthony or Baxter, and I'll go talk to him because for sure it's a team effort. But if I'm not doing it, somebody saw what happened, and they're going to go address that issue before it becomes a real problem. So that, man, that's a lot of it. A lot of life is just showing up. And so in that vein, I think that just having somebody who's empowered to be there when jumpers need them. I mean, we all screw up, and I do it all the time. And I think that those, for the two drop zone managers that we've got, or the two SNTAs, they handle it super, super well, sometimes better than me, as far as like talking to people and just being gentle but firm with, hey, that wasn't right, and this is how we need to do it in the future. But just showing up for those things. I mean, I can think of, again, I'm not going to call anybody out, but drop zones that have a fatality and they don't realize it until the next day. And that is insane. That's insane. That there's not someone out there shepherding these people through the activity that we're doing, and being willing to help when we make mistakes, because that's going to happen all the time. So without getting into specifics, I think that's the general culture that I jump in all the time, and I'm really thankful that that's the place that I'm at.
One thing is that you always need to say something, no matter how little it is. Don't be afraid to go up and say with bad pattern or whatever, say something. Because again, I've learned through experience, the times you don't say something and then something in the end bad happens, that's when you're not going to sleep at night. Just because you say something and maybe that person's not going to like you afterwards, whatever. I don't really care. I'm still going to be able to sleep at night because I did my job. I said something. I brought it to the awareness of that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't like
the entire culture of people.
No.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't always love being confronted with my mistakes either, but it needs, if you're going to be a human being in the world, those things need to get better. And sometimes hearing it from somebody else, or a different, I mean, sometimes just a different viewpoint, it's just a different idea. Did you think about this? That gets a kernel of thought going in your mind, and can change the way that you handle things. And certainly I've been around for my share of things where it's like Anthony said, I don't sleep because I could have said something. I could have just offered one little thing that for whatever reason I didn't. And then this thing happened, and I realized later, man, I mean, it's not my fault, but I could have maybe changed that outcome by just being a little bit more assertive and thinking of it in a way that I'm, as uncomfortable as this conversation might be, I'm trying to help this person. And if I do that gently and in the right frame of mind, then like Anthony said, I can sleep at night knowing that I tried.
Well, and
and
when
hopefully
it's done in the right way, it actually proves that you care about that person.
I agree.
And like, I mean, you remember when you were here in Texas and you talked to me about doing the stall search in the pattern?
Oh yeah.
Remember? Like,
yeah.
You proved to me that you, number one, that you pay attention to me, that you care about me and actually watch what I'm doing. Like that made me feel good. I was like, oh, JRuss is actually watching me in the pattern. That's cool. Like he cares, you know? And then you took the time to say, hey, in a very caring way, like, hey, think about this. Let me walk you through these things. And for you to think about, you didn't berate me. You didn't make fun of me. You didn't even say that I was wrong. You just helped me think through all of what it could be. And I was like, oh, okay, yes, that's very helpful. Thank you. You know, so even if they
I
do
think
get
you
upset
just
at you,
summed up the culture at Skydive Chicago.
yeah,
I
that's
mean,
awesome. That's great.
That's a great way to describe it, and I'm glad that I did it in a way that you agreed with. But that story is the. I mean, I brought that to your drop zone for a short period of time, but that's what we get every day. That's Skydive Chicago.
Yeah.
Someone's going to pay attention. They're going to give a shit about your safety, and if something's going wrong that they think that they can address or improve, they're gonna come talk to you. And it isn't to make you defensive, and it's not to put you on the back foot. It's just, hey, let's have a good time skydiving and stay safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, being humble is actually, again, one of the values too. Again, it's just everybody started from jump one. And the cool thing about the sport is most of us, a lot of sports, you don't even remember when you started because you were like, 5 years old. But most of us, unless you're Rick Nelson, that started at 4, like we were all 18. So we have an idea. We have a little bit of that knowledge of, we have that remembrance of when we were young and didn't know anything in the sport. And we still don't know anything in the sport, but maybe a little bit more, but we can actually, we can remember that time. So.
Yeah. I remember. But I was 30.
You don't remember anything. You and your concussed goldfish
Do you guys
brain.
know that on my way to AFF, I did a tandem? I actually did a static line when I was like 22, but I don't count that as my first skydive. My first skydive was when I was 30. I did a tandem, and the next day I came back to do the AFF course, and I hit a squirrel on the way to the drop zone and killed it. Almost freaking turned around. My buddy Graham was in the car with me, and omen. He's like, "Oh, bro, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign.
Don't do it, man. Don't go."
So I do remember my first jump.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh,
Anthony,
man.
what else you got for us, man? What do you want to sum up about running a drop zone and keeping all of us Yahoos safe?
I mean, I've already said a lot of it, but it's not me. It's everybody else. Like it's a whole team effort to keep I don't make the decisions. I didn't make, like, I'm just watching everybody. I like to tell everybody, like, the SNTA is advisor. The last letter, it's advisor. I'm not doing anything but advising people. So the fact that they can either listen to me or listen to people like you, they're the ones that are making it safe. We're just kind of there to help facilitate the whole thing. So if I did 40,000 skydives all myself, then I could put it all on me, but I'm not. It's everybody.
Yeah.
We're working our way there.
Yeah.
Getting there.
Cool.
Takes time. Well, it's
Are we there?
I think so. You've done it again. You've wasted another perfectly good hour listening to the Crave Show with JRuss and Chris, and today Anthony. Thanks for wasting your time with us. Right, JRuss?
Nobody wasted their time. Today they got smarter.
That's right. They did.
Yeah,
they did. No, Anthony, thank you so much for giving us some of your time, man. It means a lot to us. All these different people coming on the show and just sharing the knowledge, and that's what we're trying to do. And you hinted at it earlier, just knowledge, sharing this knowledge base with everyone. And nobody has all of the knowledge. Nobody is awesome and perfect and good at everything, especially in skydiving. So the fact that we can have people on and pick your brain and ask you all these questions and make it available to as many people as possible. I just think it's really great. I love it that we can share information with one another and be safer and have fun and be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Anthony. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for listening to the show, you guys. I hope you're enjoying it. Get out there with your friends. And like Anthony said, remember why we do this. It's fun. Man, it's so fun jumping out of an airplane, just with your friends in the sky, having a good time. So get out there, have a good time, jump out of an airplane, crave, do more, be better. Thanks, you guys. See ya.
See you guys.
Thanks.